think that then clarifies the question of honorable member. Do you want to follow up?
Yes. Now, if the apology was received on the 12th from the minister, then today is the 14th, so we had about 24 more than 24 hours. I don't know why we didn't postpone the meeting. I'm trying to understand why we didn't postpone the meeting, because why we allowed the department to come when they are here and there's expenses, traveling expenses involved, and then we come in this house and say, in this meeting, and say no, they must go back, while we should have stopped them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Goeiemiddag. Middaghani. Chair, let us start with the correspondence that we received from Mr. Mkhize, if I'm correct. The first correspondence that we received was going to deal with the department about at 12:30. And subsequent to that, there was amendments done to the agenda of the day. Hence, you find that the agenda consisting of the department was pushed aside. I believe it was because the minister is not present. And even if you look in terms of the agenda or what you are dealing with now, it's one. So the matter that we are going to deal with is the matter that is going to start at 1. So because it was clear that if the minister or the deputy minister is not present, we are not going to entertain anyone. That was the undertaking that was made by the chair, and it came from the chairperson of this committee, and then we agreed with that because we feel we need to start on a clean slate, and ministers need to understand that if they need to be here, they need to be here. And we are not going to compromise because the department is here. So, because what is confusing is that if there was an apology from the ministers, and why is the officials here, then I don't understand what is actually happening here. Because even our business of the day was actually changed. We were supposed to start at 12:30, dealing with you as a department. But because of the absence of your ministers, it was changed. So when we came here, we came with the view that we are not going to deal with the department today. We are only going to deal with our matters that are going to start at 1. So based on that, I propose that we stick to the decision that was made last week. When the minister is ready to come and speak to us, she must come. We're going to stick to our decision that we have made, Chair, so that the ministers understand that we are serious as this committee, and they must take us serious. We are not going to bend, and it's not a sign of disrespect. It's a sign to show that we are very serious as this committee. Thank you very much.
Honorable Chairperson, I think we need to put our foot down. The Honorable, we have a problem, Honorable Mr. Tichi and your crew. We want the NCOP to be respected like any other house. And we don't want to see this house look like a junior house to National Assembly. The way the Honorable Minister is doing things, they are really want us to think he's also one of those who looks down upon this house. This is the NCOP representing the provinces, very important house of Parliament. And you as director and DG and your staff, really, according to books, you don't report to us. You don't report to us. You report to your respective honorable minister. The only person who account to us is a minister. If we accept anything from you, we will be doing not according to books. We appreciate that you have come.
and said, this is the point, but the information which was needed, which I executed anyways, not is executed by the minister, I'm here to present it. Better able to even answer the questions, because I implement all the things that the minister was going. Minister was just going to be a spokesperson. So in terms of compliance, I fully agree with you. But in terms of operational impediments, imperatives, I'm sorry, I think it would have been my humble request, as I said to the Honorable Chair and Honorable members, my knees were down just on the cost aspect of it. But I am not going to change members at all. I was just making just a point. And I'm not at all, as the member said, we are the wrong people to be here. The minister is supposed to be here. And we respect that. I just wanted to just make just that point without changing the minds of the people, of the honorable members.
Honorable Fayela, welcome. Honorable Mteto. I will note your hand.
Honorable Chair, if you can limit us to have in committee without them, we have to discuss something as a committee during their absence. If you permit that.
Let me take the hand ka Babu Mtsamai. Honorable Mtsamai.
Okay. Thanks, Chairperson. You see, Chairperson, when I consider the taxpayers' money for that being used for the committee to be here, I wanted to ask the committee that we must first meet before we can allow them to go.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mtsamai. Can you give us time as politician to look at the matter, and then we'll call you? It will be just 5 minutes, and then we're done. There's a mistake that has happened from our side. When I received the communication that the minister is not coming, it's me who said, one, considering the fact that we all have caucuses today, the meeting should start at 1. 2, we should rearrange the agenda of the meeting and remove the presentation by the minister based on our decision on the matter. But what has not happened, it's what you were asking. This matter, Yoba, we have postponed presentation yabo was not communicated to them by the office. I just pick it up when you asked that question, did you tell them? And they said no. But now they are here because of our own making. We rearranged the agenda and then they were not told about that. So I want us to discuss, when we discuss your request, also take this into consideration that we have made as a
Honorable Chair, you see, really, I'm very much concerned the behavior of the ministers. Their behavior, to me, doesn't make any sense. Especially, I must say this, especially, this is their job. We are sitting here to help them to do their job. And if they don't come while we are coming to help them to do their job, doesn't make sense to me. But at the other hand, you know, we are not coming here to fight. We are coming to do job. I want to be open to other colleagues of mine, especially the EFF and the DA. Not you, not the ANC. The EFF and the DA, to please let us do our job. I know the minister has flopped in front of us, but we also come here to do our job as political parties. Let us just close one eye and allow them to do presentation today, hoping they've got something to learn out of this. I'm asking now the EFF and the DA to to consider allowing them to do their presentation, hoping that they're going to learn something out of it. That's my plea.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've realized that we have made a very big mistake as the committee. We are one thing here. When our secretary failed to inform them that they were not supposed to be here. So with that, let's be one thing, not being divided. This is not an issue of the other political party. It's for us as National Council of Provinces to consider that we have made mistake, but we cannot cover our mistake before them. We have to tell them what they've done is wrong. Not to bring the minister, but let take their. Okay, I thank you.
No, thank you, Chairperson. Look, you know, if I can just be clarified when it comes to the issue of the minister and his deputy. You see, my concern is that, you know, I agree with Honorable Unveiled, but I'm just failing to understand what is it exactly that's happening. You can't be, as a minister who's supposed to be every time, a day before, you cancel the meeting every time. So that's my main concern. You know, and whatever decision that we're going to take, if the meeting continues or I mean, if we allow the department to do the presentation, it's fine. Hence I've said I'm supporting Honorable Unveiled, considering the issue of the cost and all those kind of. But I'm trying to understand why the minister at the 11th hour every time. I don't know, maybe Chairperson, you've got a better explanation to us. I think because those people are innocent, they are here to work, to appear before the committee and do what is expected of them. But what is it that's going on with this minister and his deputy? If we can just be sorted out there, then I think we don't have issues.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, to me this is a fact of the integrity of our committee, first and foremost. We took a decision about the ministers. These people have been here 3 times before. They know what happens if you come here without the minister. The minister cannot say, I do not know. We all have cell phones. We all have access to Google. If you've got a Google diary on your cell phone, it will in every morning tell you exactly what's going to happen today. I am sorry, it's fruitless and wasteful expenditure, somebody's got to pay for it. But if people do not empower themselves with the competence to be in a governance position, we are not in some kind of secondary whatever, we top structure of government. So we cannot allow that people come here time and time again, 4 times in a row, with the exact same story. It is affecting our integrity as a committee. As sorry as I am for the DG that is here and all these people that are here, I feel for them. But really, we cannot allow that, because if you go to a court of law and you said you didn't know, there's no excuse for you for that, because it's written in stone. It is there for us to see. They know the rules of this body. And this is not a body, it's a governing body. So they know that. They cannot disrespect, because ignorance equals disrespect. And the disrespect of this petition select committee is also it's my responsibility to see that people acknowledge our integrity. And that's why I plead for that. It's not to offend any one of them, but to stay on principle and on what the law says, and the rules and the regulations and everything, and they have to abide with that. And if they know the minister is not coming, why did they not phone and say, Mkhize, hello, the minister is not here? What now? Because they should know where the minister is, or the deputy minister. They should know they couldn't come. So there's no excuse for we didn't know. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Thank you so much. On behalf of the ANC Chair, because I can see all the opposition have spoken now. On behalf of the ANC, we also support the notion that the meeting must continue, and we further support the issue to say maybe beside this meeting we need to have a meeting with the minister. We can have a meeting with the minister even outside this forum and discuss our issues with him, because we've got the right to summon any executive into our meeting without the officials. Maybe sometimes next week, if you can exercise that, try to write to him that we want to meet with him and discuss other issues. Otherwise, all information is in front of us, Chair. Thank you very much. Sorry for coming late.
In summary, there's majority saying let's allow them, but over and above that, we still need to see the minister in person and vent our frustration about how the department has handled the committee. For the purpose of the integrity of the committee, I know that the DA feels strongly that let us be consistent and do not allow them to speak. We are taking note of that, Honorable Professor, that this thing you are vehemently against it. Yes, ma'am.
Chair, it serves no purpose to see the minister afterwards. The minister has to do the executive, this is executive undertakings. It's got nothing to do with that. The minister will see that the undertakings on this page that we have to discuss today has to be done. You cannot let anybody else decide upon you that is that he or she They are the top structure of who the undertakings has. They committed to these undertakings, not the DG, or not any of the staff. And that is the principle. Therefore, I cannot stand this meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Khulule.
Thank you. Honorable Fowler, it's unfortunate, Honorable Professor, that this thing is dividing us, because one of the issues that I raised is that we are partly at fault for them to be here. So we contributed because it didn't tell them not to come. So the full expenditure that they haven't get today, it's because of our own making as an office. So that's another thing that persuaded me to allow them to present, because we are partly at fault.
Sorry, Chair, can I just say something?
Yes.
You see, there's this thing that is confusing here. Before the DG was given an opportunity to speak, there was a ruling that you made that the majority of people said that felt that they must be released.
And there was
And now you're overturning your decision again.
listen.
So there's no.
Then there was.
So I'm still on the point.
No, correction before continuation. I said so, but before that, I was persuaded for a caucus in this house. And then after the caucus, the members changed the decision and said, let's allow them after we have heard all what has happened. I'm not changing my decision, but I am informed by your debates.
But because I don't recall the majority of people saying that, we must continue the meeting. And the issue also, like trying to work on our conscience, saying that there's irregular expenditure or wasteful expenditure. Someone must account. It's not us that is going to account. They must account, because if they were not informed, and the one that was supposed to inform them that this committee has taken a decision that we are not going to listen to officials when the minister is not present, then that person was supposed to inform them. That's the bottom line. We are not condoning wasteful expenditure. We know the country is doing badly economically, but it's not the first time. It's the first, second, and the third time. So they've been coming here knowingly that they are going to. Someone must account for it.
Honorable Fire.
Madam Chair, I don't want this thing to be pushed to majority or minority, because I'm just IFP alone here. I'll never have a majority. I'm IFP, a single man. I was speaking to my colleagues, EFF, DA, and also you guys, that let us consider allowing them to do their presentation without any checking who's majority, who's minority. Because if we take that way, I'll never win. If you can take the majority, minority side, I'll never win. So I was just asking my colleagues, let us look at the matter, and if we listen to them, if we allow them to present themselves, they are taking nothing from us, but somebody is taking a lesson somewhere. By allowing us to do a presentation, they are taking nothing from us, colleagues, but somebody is learning a lesson somewhere. Let's teach them a lesson, not by saying no. We don't need to fight to teach somebody a lesson. We don't need to fight. But I want to support a notch where we say we need to have an audience with the minister somewhere, somehow, without these people, so that he can hear our insight. What do we think of him? Because we strongly believe he reports to us. So if we are someone else to hear, he must come. It's a matter of must. That's my position.
Thank you. Honorable Professor?
Chair, I'm really not disrespecting this committee. I really act on behalf of integrity and principle. And that's what we stand for. The fact the day off. We're here 3 times. They're coming the 4th time. They know they don't have the minister with them. Can they not phone McKinsey and say, McKinsey, is the meeting still on? There's technology, there's telephones. You cannot excuse yourself in a position that they are in a position that we are in, to not make contact. You cannot excuse yourself from that. So that is why if we allow this, it will be allowed again, because 3 times they came for the same thing, the 4th time they're here, and still they continue to do it like they do. So then they must pay for it. If they do not make another plan, they've got to pay for it.
Honorable Mthethwa, and we close this matter after.
Chair, can we now check? Let's respect all the views.
Yeah.
Those that want to leave, they may leave. We understand we are party to them as well. But for now, the ANC will remain in the meeting, Chair. I just wanted to declare that the ANC will remain in the meeting.
You know, I'm worried because I didn't want us to get to this point. As this committee, we are doing very well. And I do not want this matter to divide us. Because we still have 5 years to work together. And when we do things, we must do things really doing things rational, you know, and also be guided by what the law is saying. If there's still a strong feeling that the department must go back, it must go back. Because I don't want anyone to leave their house because there is no coherence in terms of resolution of this matter. Let's call them and release them. Honorable Mthethwa.
Chair, I don't agree with that, Chair. I don't agree. We've got an obligation, Chair, here to ensure that I'm telling you, Chair, even if the minister is here, it's very minimal that the minister will add into this matter for now. Why don't we hear the report? I accept the colleagues that are saying, look, we have been undermined here for more than 3 times. As their organization, they felt that no, they are not going to sit. It's fine. That is also part of democracy, Chair. It must not be seen like they are dividing the committee. They are not dividing the committee. They must be allowed to leave. Those that, not unless the majority is leaving, then there is no meeting.
I do not want it to go to there.
But that's part of democracy.
Other items to deal with.
But that's part of democracy, Chair, and also part of the process that you need to go through that. We can't please everybody.
No, don't worry.
No,
Let us
actually,
not
Honorable
make...
Mthethwa is the one who's complicating things here. He shouldn't have said what he has said. Because here there's a problem on the side of the department and on the committee itself. Understand? So that is what we were trying to do out of the 2 situations. Now, Honorable Mthethwa came, he said, those who want to leave, they must leave, and then the meeting will continue. It's wrong. That's a very wrong approach. Because
That's why I'm saying...
We're trying to meet each other halfway here and see if we can...
No bullying. Honorable Professor, sit down.
Yeah. So,
Sit down.
Chairperson.
No.
All right.
Listen, Vanderman. Let's call the guys outside and they must leave and we continue with our meeting. I am not going to allow a situation where, and it's a final decision by the chair. No, it's fine, you can talk, but the decision has been taken. I don't want to do that.
The process, it's the procedure. It's procedure to check that. Those that are leaving is not because they hate us.
Honorable Mthethwa, don't go there.
Chair,
Don't go
it's
there.
easy. Let's indicate I'm leaving.
Yes.
I'm leaving.
when we are dealing with Eskom. But I'm asking that because I think we must not lose focus in understanding that the main purpose of the state-owned companies is to operationalize the broad socio-economic development plans for the whole government, and to generate inclusive growth for the government, to provide efficient network services to those who can pay and those who cannot pay. So I think based on that, I just want to understand the views. But Chair, on page 2 of the presentation, on page on page 3 of the presentation, I just want to be taken into confidence about the process and the program Eskom has currently on their asset management problem. Do they have the plan to improve on that field? What are the plans in action? What are the plans currently, and what are the plans in the future? Fourthly, Chair, the relevance of Eskom finance, but I'm partially covered about the presentation. I think in slide in the progress to say you're dealing with the non-core functions. But I'm worried, Chair, and you always, the issue of the time frames and the implementation within the time frames, to say, looking at your processes, you'll be able to deliver that within the time frame, because you said the time frame is within March, it must be before March 2020, if I had it correct. But are you able to deliver on that? I'm asking that, Honorable Chair, based on the issue that was raised on bullet on bullet 4, yes, and on bullet 8, on the issue of making sure that we minimize the spending vis-a-vis the issue of Eskom able to be able to sustain itself. Chair, I think I will. My last 2 questions. I would really want to be taking into confidence on page 13 of the presentation of the DDG. On the issue of consultation and the issue of legislation review, the processes and the time frames. If we need to consult, what are the processes going forward? Who are we consulting, and what legislations are we talking about? And what is the role of this portfolio committee in particular? And what is the role of Parliament? But also the issue of private players vis-a-vis the issue of privatization. I think we need to be, Chair, we need to be taken into confidence about it, and also to be taken fairly on the issues of saying what is it that is going to happen when we involve the private players, as you said in the presentation. For now, Chair, I think I will end there. Thank you.
Okay. Honorable Dlamini, Gumede.
Thank you, Chair. May I join my colleague in terms of thanking the comprehensive report. It's very detailed, and I hope it will address many of the concerns that we have, not as politicians as well as the communities outside. But my understanding is we're in this dilemma because of one thing that many of us have failed to confront, and that is corruption. It's good that we configure and change our form and come into the next format. what steps has the department taken to ensure that we are not sailing along with some of those rotten potatoes which may still be remained perhaps within the system? Perhaps the second question is, as we usher into the new phase, I know that in many instances we all say that municipalities are weak, municipalities don't have money. Are we not going to face a similar situation where many of the municipalities, as much as I understand the CRO that the minister has set up, do we have a strategy that in fact will monitor the municipalities that they do pay, so that in the near future we are not seen being crippled again by the non-payment of the municipalities? I want to say our coexistence at times it's very, very much political. Therefore, I will urge, as much as I don't know how the department will address this, that some of the concerns that are raised by unions, it may create some distortions, but if they are not addressed vigorously, they may at times derail us or even influence the communities outside. There is one thing critical that I will urge that the department do. I'm hoping that the department is exposed to the social media. So my understanding is as well that we need to take the masses along with us. I'm happy with what my colleague has raised, that it will be good as well to get the views from the cabinet, if ever there are any, that what's the concern, so that we all move in unison. May I stop here, because some of the questions that I've jotted have been addressed. If ever there is a need, I'll come back.
Thank you, Honorable Kumed. Can you switch your mic off? Honorable Shabala.
Thanks, Jefferson. Would have rather wanted the minister, but we understand that ministers have cabinet to pose questions, so I'll try to be mild. It's a shame you're alone. I feel for you. I don't even know where to begin. So let me try to be as mild as I can and start by welcoming the paper. We saw it when Minister was making media briefing on it. Look, it's much welcomed at this point, because we want power generation at this point. We want stability, but we want to move ahead from the issues that we've been hanging around Eskom and its financial state at this point. So for me, at this point, and I would like to say, as the ANC, we're really looking forward to this unbundling. However, there are concerns, so I'll just be mindful trying for you. One, can I just ask that, what are the driving forces behind this roadmap? The roadmap, the bureaucrats that came up with the roadmap, because I would like to think you didn't sit down and write it. So I'm sure there should have been certain skills or other bureaucrats or persons that we consulted insofar as coming up with this roadmap. I'm kind of interested to get the masterpiece around this, so that we understand at the backdrop of the peoples who are coming with this. The board appointment, it says somewhere in your presentations that the board by the 31st of December, the current board of Eskom is not complete. It needs to be completed by the next month. So I want to find out how far is that process. I link my question to the issue of the boards. Is that in these three phases and these three unbundling, will they be boards appointed to all these three unbundling? And at what cost do they come with all these boards? And what process, again, the timelines of making sure that they will be in place, considering the fact that you're saying by March you should be in place. So I just wonder, at what cost to the state will this board appointments, and will it really take the whole full composition of the board, or there will be specific persons designated for specific matters that they must look into, considering the fact the time, we don't have luxury of time, especially with the issues of Eskom. I know my minister is never afraid to ask to answer difficult questions. The NUMSA and NUM outlined its position around against the separation. Is that the case? And the fact that there is fears around the loss of jobs, it's not a secret. That of course it will exacerbate the rate of unemployment and foster the low economic growth. Has the department itself discussed with all the stakeholders in finding some amicable solution, but also finding each other insofar so that we can move forward and we can be able to bring some confidence around the issue of job losses? What are we going to do around that? The discussions with coal producers. It says in your roadmap you're going to consider indexing the price of coal supplied to Eskom in an attempt to contain price inflation. What is the view of the department insofar as the Department of Energy and Minerals, and how will this affect the coal mining industry? The market, you just said the market, markets are looking for policy certainty more than anything else. And you're saying that it kind of like there isn't a view necessarily. It's a wait and see what's going to come. But what will we say to markets insofar as policy certainty on this issue? The non-core assets. Do we have strategic partners? And who are we selling these non-core assets to? You're talking about, of course, the loan book. It's not looking good. But if we're going to sell and get rid of the non-core assets, is it going to come at more? Are we going to generate some revenue? It's a burden that we're getting rid of, but is it going to give us some sort of revenue? The last point, the municipality debt. It's here on your presentation. The Soweto issue, and I'm going to keep on raising this issue as far as Eskom comes before us. And as long as we keep on raising the 40 billion that we're saying we're not collecting in Soweto, and every month we're going to raise it almost as if it's a slogan. It's not a slogan. The issue of Soweto, reality of the situation that we live in an unequal society. And the people of Soweto, those are the despondent and indigent communities. And this is an historical issue. So the question I have for Eskom, and these are the proposals that we made. Do we have a strategy, a way to engage? We agree with the president. People must pay for the electricity. People must pay for what they consume. But the president further goes that the people who can afford to pay. Now, have we done as Eskom and sat down with social development, because they will know the indigent community, people receive grants, they will know those states SA will know where those communities, because you cannot switch off electricity for Soweto residents from the month of May. There are people who are sick. But the question that I have, those indigent communities, you will know them. You will know people who can afford to pay, who are employed, who are not paying for electricity. So the social grant, Department of Social Services, includes that SA can assist you. So you don't penalize somebody who's paying for over a person who's not paying, but you also don't penalize somebody who cannot afford to pay, who's unemployed, who's indigent, and we're living this situation. They're going to court, they're up in arms, but Eskom is not coming to the party. It is just saying people must just pay, and the 40 billion keeps on escalating. We are not resolving the situation, and my submission is that we need to change the attitude of our communities. It's time that we must educate our communities how they must have a good relationship with the power and with the electricity that they consume. Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Chairperson, I've got one question to ask because Babu Kumete here covered me on a few questions that I wanted to ask. The presenter spoke about, creating an inter-company competition and to ensure efficiency between different players. And she also mentioned that that has been the case before. So I want to understand as to why did Eskom do away with that in the first place.
Thank you. Honorable Lamed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's promising. But now I think we miss about the strategy of the collection. I think next meeting maybe Eskom must come with a very, very serious strategy for collections, because there is a department also and the municipality, including the legal department, must be involved for these collections. It's not only Eskom only, because that is the monies that lay there with that come in to the Eskom. Also the issue of the package of the salaries and package is not here in the roadmap, because also maybe the Eskom got a huge package of the official, maybe all the monies that we are putting there is going to it's not doing the right thing for the Eskom because of the huge package. Also, issue of the coal. Where did you buy the coal? Because maybe the competition, the prices, maybe we can overlook also the coal system that we are buying the coal. Thank you, Chairperson. I must stop there because other things are covered.
Honorable Kashalia.
Thank you, Chair. There are a couple of issues which I want to address. One is firstly to say that clearly we welcome the unbundling, and obviously it's a positive move. It needs to be applauded, and the timelines are in place, and this will have to be measured going forward in terms of that. Secondly, there are a couple of areas which I suppose I call park and pray areas. One is debt, where your EBIT is lower than what's required to service your debt. That needs clear addressing, and it would be very important for us as a committee, I think, to see the key measures from people who are much cleverer than me, who deal with finance, as to how they are going to address this particular issue. And it does impact on operational aspects, because the improvement of operational issues will then impact how you service your debt. The other area is labor and the bloated labor force that insofar as it exists. There our hands are tied, and I would again hope that we will address flexibility in this regard. The other is corruption. I'd like as well to see a detailed exposition of the measures that are in place to deal with this. But that said, in terms of park and pray, there are a couple of areas that we can actually roll our sleeves up and address. One is good business practices, and we all pay lip service to the reduction of red tape and good business practices. They impact areas like procurement. For example, it's my understanding, and I'm new in this committee, but that there are 2 tiers of accreditation that's required for suppliers at an entity level and at overarching level. Now, why these 2 areas? Surely we can deal with this in a more intelligent fashion. if you take the issue of coal, when you see emergency trucks going out you understand that there are coal shortages. I have no doubt that management is able to count. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that we'll run out of coal at this particular time if we don't have. But the point is that what we have don't have in terms of good business practices, perhaps, is that what's in place requires you to go out to tender. That takes 3 months in terms of processes. You need so many tenders. In the meanwhile, there's a gap where you have shortages and you can't address this. Now, if you can't address that structural problem, then you're just going to be doing the same things and saying, we'll try and work on this. It doesn't particularly help. So is anything being done about this is my question. The other area is HR. It seems to me there's a kind of one-size-fits-all approach. People's performance in a business are impacted by how others perform. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all process. So the question is, do we have a system of differentiated incentives by business unit? I think that will be useful to assist people to do their jobs better, because fairness, after all, means that everyone needs to be measured by their performance. That's fairness as far as I can see. Not everyone must be the same. Now, the overarching issue that comes to mind that impacts all of this for me is the interpretation of government shareholder directives, and I wish the Minister was here, to management and to the entity. The government shareholder representatives are there on a daily basis, often engaging, perhaps telling management what they should do. It is my understanding, and I pose this as a question, does this not in some way in the past, and we continue to do in the future, create a kind of climate of fear perhaps, and of over-stringent application of PFMI measures, for example? We need to build a culture of trust between the shareholder and employees, and transparency is terribly important. Now, in terms of transparency, I don't know how I'm going to do my job on this committee if I don't have sight of the shareholder compact. That is a crucial document which I and this committee needs to see. And I've looked for it left, right, and centre, but I don't find it. So perhaps you can assist me in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mara.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want first to make a remark about the one slide that's Eskom's current financial position on those bullet points, where the coal costs have increased 5-fold and the payroll costs 3-fold over the past decade, and about the outstanding fees are in excess of 40 billion. And that together with a loss of management and engineering skills, although there's this increase in cost as far as staff cost, to put it that way. Now, when we actually will unbundle, to put it that way, how would this whole situation be cut cost-wise between the three entities, to put it in that line? And a crucial question would be, if Eskom remained the owner of the transmission entity, there will not be a fair competition between the IPPs and Eskom generation. How's that going to work? That's going to be an unfair situation going forward. And another question is, what is the possibilities now here going forward, as we actually now to engage in solving this problem? What possibilities are there for public-private partnerships going forward, and to increase the public-private partnership or even privatization of some of these functions going forward? and a very, very important issue is this generation of electricity, and more than 90% of it's dependent on coal. And I think there must be a very serious look at the contracts with all the coal mines, and it should be a long-term contracts that should be put in place. And as previously has been done, and it was to the benefit of Eskom years ago. We can go back in the history and we can look at it, and it did work very well. Now, new energy going forward, and clean energy, we know that is the thing of the new millennium. And how is the government going to actually boost that section of the energy mix going forward as part of the bigger mix? Because we know at this point in time that that portion is so small versus the portion of coal-driven energy. And then this question about the closure of power stations, the old ones, and then the question about the new ones, Kusile, Madupi, that's been built. And that is very strange. How is it possible that two brand new power stations default time on time with problems? So what happened with when it was newly built and it is still in process? There was people in charge of this multi-billion projects that we experience the quality of work that is not up to standard, what's delivered. Because we shouldn't experience these problems with newly built power stations. Thank you.
Honorable Piri.
Thank you, Chair. Let me welcome the presentation as I join my colleagues. And I don't have much. Most issues has been raised, and even to say the minister is not here, it was going to be fair enough for us to also get the responses or some of the clarities from the ministry. But let me just have two questions. Apparently, acting DDG, there's in terms of NARSA, there's a tariff determination that has been challenged to the financial situation of Eskom. So my question would be to say, how are you handling it internally as department, as an advisor or as the overseer of Eskom? And secondly, my question will be on the issue of stakeholder engagement, in a sense that the document is of high level. And when talking about Eskom, it's for the public interest. South Africans at large wants to understand actually what does this on a daily or on an ABC language for them, what this unbundling is. Then in terms of your plan, how are you going to engage stakeholders into this and explain or deliberate it further for even a mere just community member to understand? One, if you don't understand it, or our community members might think the minute you present this document, it means there will be no load shedding anymore. But I believe it's not the right way. So how do we put our communities into confidence to understand versus this roadmap versus the load shedding? Do you have a proper plan in place? And not forgetting the major stakeholder, which is your municipalities, that they are the ones who gives who receives and their communities as the end user of the energy or Eskom product. So what is more important to me, I really want to understand what is your plan in place to engage, especially with ordinary South Africans, to understand this roadmap and this process, because it's a high level thing. But then do we have a plan to communicate with our communities? Unnecessary protest, unnecessary conflict within municipalities, Eskom, and the department itself. How are you going to consult? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, honorable members. Thank you, Honorable Perry. All the issues in relation to the content of this document. I think that's what is important. If there is any question that you have been brought here to handle this question by the minister, because he appreciates your capacity to deal with the situation. I'm only having one question, that is, in the light of the three envisaged subsidiaries, let's say 2021, we have been finally unbundled Eskom. Will Eskom wither away, or will we have some kind of a coordinating structure or governance or any form of something that will be referred to as Eskom, or we won't have anything? We'll be dealing with an entity which is dealing with transmission, and it will have its own name, if there will be a name, or generation. We won't have the phrase called Eskom in our lips will end. I just have that, or perhaps we'll be having what Honorable Shareholder was asking. We'll be having these three entities with their own boards and the executive. It will be a picture like that. Thank you. I think you are now ready. Yeah. Take us through. If your minister come, you still have time, we'll give him to assist you.
I will hand over immediately.
No. You captured the question. You want to that.
I'll assist him with questions.
Yeah. No. That's why I was having a problem with people who are referring to the minister who is not here. If the minister was here, I didn't have. The minister is not here, you are here on his behalf, that handle the questions.
Okay, thank you, members, for the questions. I'll try and answer as detailed each question as possible. The question of Cabinet's view on the paper. So the paper was presented to Cabinet before it was released, and it was endorsed by Cabinet. I think a lot of the cross-cutting issues were also identified, and hence I referred to a structure within government which will be a clearinghouse in terms of dealing with the cross-cutting issues, including the environmental issues, which we are dealing with the environmental affairs, the just transition, impact on communities, policy issues in relation to the Department of Mineral Resources. So it does enjoy Cabinet's decision, and I think the cross-cutting issues have been identified. In terms of the question around impact on the poor has come across consistently, also related to the question on Soweto and whether we have a good view of the impact on indigents in terms of Eskom electricity. So in terms of the
pro-poor policies in relation to electricity. Government does have a free basic electricity policy, which requires that each municipality or each entity that provides electricity in an area does have an indigent register. In the indigent register, we provide for a minimum of 50 kilowatt hours per month for free for poor households, and there are municipalities that actually do budget over and above the 50 kilowatt hours. Ethekwini is actually has done quite well in terms of implementing the FBE. I think the challenges we have had is municipalities' ability to identify indigents, ensure that the registers are up to date, and to also ensure that the free basic electricity is only provided to households that deserve to receive the free basic electricity. So the policy is in place that is meant to protect the poor, but there is challenges in terms of ensuring that municipalities ensure that the monies get to the right place. So in relation to Soweto, I don't think that this is the primary issue, but perhaps Eskom itself needs to be able to provide a picture in terms of have they been able to successfully identify the indigent list and ensuring that those households do get the free basic electricity that has been provided for. I think it's an action that we can follow to ensure that it does support the point of ensuring that we do pursue the right people that do have money but that are just not paying. I think it's important to mention that even government departments do owe municipalities money. So more often it's not about affordability, but it's about the discipline of paying for services that have been rendered. The question around asset management now in terms of how the plants are being maintained. Yes, Eskom does have asset management principles. These are the same asset management principles that Eskom has been using when the plants were performing well. So there clearly is an issue around disciplined execution and ensuring that the asset management principles are executed, but to also ensure that how the board and Eskom manage the risk in relation to shortages of resources in the business, that the limited resources are spent in areas that are most impactful in the business. So there is an issue around Eskom not having sufficient money to spend on all the things that they want to do, but there has to be a rationalization about in managing the risks of the business. CAPEX must be spent in areas that are most impactful, and we are having conversations around the extent to which Eskom can afford the plans that it currently has. In terms of the EFC disposal, we currently, because of the extent of challenges that Eskom has, we have got weekly meetings where we discuss their liquidity position to ensure that they've got sufficient cash in the business, but that they are also dealing with the cost side of things. So from an EFC perspective, it's a specific item that we do monitor. We are not, EFC is actually a very good loan book because it has employees on there that are guaranteed income every month. So from a market perspective, it's a good loan book. So we're not discarding it because it's a distressed asset. It's a good loan book, and we expect to get quite good value for it from the market. In terms of a question on slide 13 about the legislative and consultative process, there's various stakeholders that have been consulted at the development of the paper. This included, you'll recall that this initial decision came from SONA, the President SONA speech in February, in February this year, and that posed that there has been a number of consultation with stakeholders, including meetings that the President himself held with labor formations, including meetings that the Minister has had with various unions and labor federations, and Eskom level meetings that the board and management have held with unions in terms of consultation on issues. I think the issue around job security and concerns around job security is understood. And we are constantly reaffirming the position that in this process there will be no large-scale retrenchments in terms of Section 189 of Eskom employees, but that we will explore alternatives because we have to deal with the issue of the manpower costs that Eskom has, but we will consider alternatives. I think the issue of dealing with Eskom must be understood in relation, like I said earlier, in relation to the economy. So preserving jobs within Eskom does not assist us to preserve jobs in the bigger economy, in the sense that if we don't resolve Eskom in terms of certainty of electricity supply and trying to get efficient cost, then we will continue to see the extent to which we are seeing factories and large customers closing their shops in South Africa. So we need to ensure that we are able to articulate the story well, that resolving Eskom is important to resolving the bigger economic question that we have in the country. So as much as we want, there's a commitment not to do large-scale retrenchments, there has to be a process in terms of dealing with the fundamentals around the cost base, so that we've got an entity that can support and enable economic growth in the country. The question around the private players versus privatization. So in the current plan, in terms of how it's articulated, there is no decision around privatizing any aspect of the Eskom business as we have, save for the non-core assets that were raised earlier on that will be disposed. But we will see more private players come into the generation sector as we expand the generation capacity that's required. So as you decommission the plants, you will see more IPPs come in to build different types of technology, whether it's renewables, there's coal IPPs that have already announced, and there's also a gas master plan that the Department of Minerals and Energy is currently working on. So there is no privatization, but certainly an increase in private sector participation in the sector is what we anticipate. Honorable Gumede says, is asking, are we here because of corruption? I think the Eskom crisis is a result of a protracted period of bad decisions that we have made, firstly as government, and secondly as Eskom management in itself. So government, from a government perspective, in the sense that we made a decision around building these plants too late. We built it off tariffs, and that we've had significant cost overruns and schedule overruns that have added onto Eskom's debt burden, firstly. Secondly, that has resulted in Eskom spending the majority of its capex on the new build instead of maintaining existing plant. I think corruption and the extent of corruption that we've seen in the last few years was an added factor in terms of worsening the situation at Eskom. But primarily it's because of the bad business decisions that we've made, and also bad policy decisions we've made in terms of deciding too late to build this power plant. And maybe to just conclude with Honorable Maria's question around why the plants are performing in this way, is because we went to market with this plant with very conceptual designs. We didn't have detailed designs about what we were procuring from market, and we made a lot of bad design choices, and that also the execution and the decision for Eskom to integrate by itself the size of this project also contributed to the extent to which we have had challenges with this project. So it's design errors. It's lack of detailed design when you contract, and also bad contracting in terms of liability from both parties in how the whole project was structured. I think we've learned a lot from a department's perspective. We've done independent studies. I think there's a lot of lessons learned for government in terms of how to not do large infrastructure project, and I think over and above that, we decided on large plants because of the extent of the gap that we're anticipating in the system, instead of maybe considering smaller projects. But yeah, we ended up with a concentration of risk and large plants that we couldn't execute on time and or to the right quality and standard. Do we have a strategy to monitor the municipal debt? Yes. Like I said, COGTA does, the Minister of COGTA chairs an IMTT that looks at issues around municipal debt. looking at the policy gaps that need to be identified, but we have not seen a reduction in terms of the rate at which the municipal debt is growing. If anything, the rate at which municipal debt is growing is increasing at about 1.5 billion now per month. And this is of huge concern. Eskom has established an additional team that looks at dealing with specific municipalities, those that are not paying, but also those that are paying, to ensure that they do continue to pay. I think you would have seen a number of court actions across the country in terms of either Eskom getting into agreement with customers directly that are within municipal environment so that they get paid directly, or trying to interrupt municipalities in terms against non-payment of legacy debt. So this is an issue. This is an area where we have not had a lot of traction in terms of dealing with the problem. But there is a number of platforms that are currently dealing with the municipal and Soweto debt. I think the union's concerns, could they potentially derail this process? There is ongoing engagements that we are having with Labour. I think there are concerns that we have noted. There's an Eskom leadership task team that we have established at NETLEC, where we are engaging with civil society, business and Labour in terms of the concerns that are raised. I think we don't expect that this is going to be an easy journey, but we do continue to engage, hoping that we can have productive conversations with Labour that would ensure that the totality of the system and the totality of South Africa is better off in how we deal with the Eskom problem comprehensively. So what are the driving forces behind coming with the paper? So maybe just to go back to where the decision came from. So if you recall, in November last year, the board had submitted a turnaround plan to government, and in that plan they had asked government for about 100 billion rand bailout, and they were proposing large cost saving within the business, which included the retrenchments that I alluded to earlier on, and certain levels of tariff that they had applied for from NERSA in terms of the multi-year price determination. The president then had made the decision around getting an independent view on what Eskom was asking for, because a further 100 billion rand bailout for Eskom is quite significant. And I think if you look at the country's fiscal position, you will see the constraints that government currently have in terms of our ability to bail out not just Eskom but other entities, and to also look at the larger programs of government and the large amounts of money that are currently required. So he decided to have an independent task team that would look at whether this is a fundamental solution that is being presented by the board, and what other policy issues would be considered. And one of the recommendations that was made out of that was that we must commence on a restructuring process with Eskom. But going back to the policy framework in the country, is that in 1998, the Minister of Energy at the time had released a white paper that actually lays the foundation of all the things that we are discussing here today. So this is not out of kilt with policy, and that's why Honorable Mukanazi, we're not necessarily talking about large amendments to a lot of legislation in the sector, because the legislation as we currently have it anticipated that the sector would evolve in this fashion. So the white paper on energy had already pronounced on the need to unbundle Eskom, to restructure the sector. You would recall that in the 2000s there was an intense process around trying to establish the EDI. So these were all pronouncements that had already been made. So the foundation of this paper is actually in legislation, which is in the white paper, the Electricity Regulation Act. It provides for all the functions that we are trying to have. So we have had a lot of, in terms of support, a lot of conversations in terms of the policy department, and in ensuring that we can align between various parties to ensure that the paper and the restructuring process does respond to the policy framework as anticipated by the Minister of Energy, because we don't make policy, we actually respond to what the policy position is from the Minister of Mineral Resource and Energy. In terms of the board process, yes, we currently have 3 vacancies on the Eskom board following some resignations last year. There is a process that we are following to fill in these vacancies. But I think we are also looking at, if you recall, when this board was appointed, they had a very specific mandate to go and look at the governance failures that were there within the business. So there was a very specific consideration in terms of the mixture of skills that were put into this board. But if you look at the problem statement as we have it now, we need a different set of skills on the board. So we are having also a view around reviewing the skills matrix that we currently have on the board and looking at strengthening the board further with those skills that are required. In terms of the subsidiaries themselves, obviously you need a legal entity to be in place for you to appoint the board. So we would be looking to appoint a smaller board for the transmission business to drive this process. In the long run, yes, there will be 3 independent boards for each one of the entities at a subsidiary level, but we do anticipate that the holding company will remain in place. So there will still be the main board. The positions of labor, I think I've already addressed that we do continue to engage, and we hope that we can get into having constructive conversation around what government is trying to achieve. I think the fears of unions are understood in terms of really, are we genuine in saying that there will be no job losses in this process? And we would want to hear, what assurances unions would want to have in order for them to support this process, because I think it's quite important that we are able to close that gap in terms of trust between us and unions, and ensuring that we can be partners on this journey, and in ensuring that Eskom can remain viable and that Eskom can be enabling to the South African economy. In terms of the coal index, so the conversations we've had with the coal industry were with both the Ministers of Public Enterprise and the Minister of Mineral Resource, and the Minister of Trade, Investment and Competition was also in the same discussion. So the development of the coal index is being led by the Department of Mineral Resource and Energy, and the whole principle is around Eskom should be paying the same amount of money for a similar grade of coal that you get from different sources. Obviously, logistics can be a factor in terms of differences between the two, but Eskom should not be paying different prices for similar grade of coal. And I think we are on the same page with the Department of Mineral Resources in terms of an approach to that process. What has the market's response been on policy? I think a lot of the feedback we got from the market was, I think they expected fundamentally for us to have a debt solution in the paper, and I think they also expected that to be in the MTPBS, which we did not have. I think there was a lot of expectation that was building around that before we released both the paper and the MTPBS, but government had taken a view that we have bailed out Eskom a few times, and we haven't really had the benefits of doing that. But if you go into Annexure C in the MTPBS, there is acknowledgement that we have to do something. Government has to do something with the Eskom debt. So we don't expect that unbundling would somehow result in additional cash for Eskom that would be sufficient for them to cover their obligation. Government is going to have to step in to deal with that problem over and above the support that has already been announced. So we hope that the market we have provided sufficient clarity now to the market for them to understand how we intend to embark on this journey and to provide clarity about the roadmap. So in terms of the non-core assets, I think we go out into the market with the assets that have been identified. So there isn't really specific partners that are identified upfront in terms of the disposal. It's a process that Eskom themselves are running. This is the disposal of an asset. So from a shareholder's perspective, we would anticipate that there would be a PFMA application that must then be approved for this process to be concluded. Morning. So if check, should I continue? Yes. Okay. So in terms of the question about the intra-company competition and why was it stopped? So when Eskom implemented what was supposed to be a center-led strategy around how the business is structured, which became a centralized strategy. So it became a lot more difficult, I think, for each side to have very specific costs that can be accounted for per side, because a lot of the functions became centralized. So for you to know what it costs to produce a unit of energy, you need to know all input costs, including manpower, whether it's finance, IT, and HR. And with the centralized strategy, it becomes a bit difficult for those costs to be allocated centrally. In terms of the request for us to bring a strategy around municipal debt, I think we are quite happy to ask Eskom to come to the committee and provide an update of where we are with dealing with the debt, and whether the strategy is yielding results and what support would be required from the committee to do so. The question around coal and where do we get it, I think the one of the primary issues, which is what Honorable Shabalala was raising around policy, is that if you look at the coal sector in South Africa, over the last 10 years, we really have not had growth, because we were producing 270 million tons per annum, of which Eskom consumes about 110 million tons, and we are still producing the same level of coal. And the extent to which Eskom grade coal started being attractive to the export market also became an issue. So from Eskom being able to have a broader market to source coal from, their quite constraints, and I think that's one of the issues what makes it a bit difficult for them to be able to negotiate sound pricing for coal. But we do expect that we will get into the detailed conversation around renegotiating the existing contracts, so that we have the benefits in terms of cost. I think that the question around debt, I think I have addressed. So we do recognize that we need to present a debt solution. But like I said, the government's position is that there must be a clear demonstration of progress with operational and restructuring, so that we are not bailing out an entity that's going to stay the same. In terms of procurement, I think we do say in the paper that we recognize that procurement is an issue, and that it is at the core of Eskom's issues, and also related to the issues of deep corruption that we see in the business, and that there would be consideration around alternatives to the procurement strategy that we have. But I think there's also a question around the procurement framework that we have as a country, and that the National Treasury is embarking on a process to look at what are the policies that we currently have in place that are not enabling. But I think we must also recognize the spirit of the law, and why the Treasury has embarked on the type of procurement framework that they have instituted in government and in government entities, which was to provide assurance around how public funds are spent. So as we question the enabling nature of that framework, I think we need to be able to recognize why it was put in the first place, and that we would need to, as we think about reforming that, we would need to think about whether a different system would give assurance around how money is spent. I'm going to leave the question around government directive to my minister here. Yeah, okay. In terms of the shareholder compact, I think in last week's meeting, and I would have to consult with colleagues, the presentation from the department on its performance, the shareholder compact would have been included, but I think we are quite happy to provide that to members. There's no issue. In terms of Honorable Maria's question around how will costs be cut across the three entities, I think it's quite important to make the point that What we are not embarking on is a restructuring into 3 entities that are all not viable. And that's why we are executing all these levers in parallel. So it's important that you're able to deal with revenue, that you're dealing with costs, so that when you have the 3 separate entities, they are all sustainable on a standalone basis. Because if we just unbundle Eskom in its current form now, you will have 3 entities that are not viable. So the cost cutting and the revenue strengthening needs to be will precede the process of breaking Eskom up into the 3 subsidiaries, and we've already embarked on that process of identifying and dealing with the specific levers. What is the possibility of PPPs in the unbundled Eskom? I think I've already alluded to the expansion of generation, that it will primarily be from private sector, but in terms of the existing Eskom, there is currently no conversation around privatizing any one part or having private sector participation. But I think it's important to also say that we do have private sector participation at Eskom. There are functions within power plants, there are functions within distribution. If you look at meter reading and so forth, some of those functions have been outsourced to private parties to execute. So as much as we say Eskom is a dominant player, there is a good extent to which there are a lot of contractors on site that are performing certain functions on behalf of Eskom. But I presume your question was around equity participation, so that equity participation, we are not discussing that for now. Coal mines to be looked at and contracted on a long-term basis. I think that has been one of the drivers, that Eskom has been contracting coal on a short-term basis, and also from mines that are at a distance to power plants, which has also contributed to the extent to which Eskom coal costs have grown. So as part of the Eskom's coal procurement strategy framework, they're looking at reinvesting in cost-plus mines, which are tied collieries to the stations, which should provide a downward pressure on coal costs going forward. How will government support cleaner energy? I think we already have a procurement framework in terms of IPPs. The procurement framework is as you currently know it, which is driven by Minister of Energy issuing determinations for additional capacity that is required, and that is followed by a procurement process that is run by the IPP office. So that it will be the same framework that we will use to procure power going forward. Like I said, in the long run, when you've got an independent transmission company, we expect that the procurement function would then come into the transmission entity, which has a real-time view of capacity requirements, that they would be in a position to make those decisions around procurement of additional power. The question, Honorable Piri, on the NERSA determination and impact on Eskom, yes, I think you are correct that if we just look at the recent MYPD4, there is a gap between what Eskom asked for and what was granted. The Eskom has gone to court to try and have NERSA's decision overturned. I think the primary concern we also have as a shareholder is that the shareholder support that was provided to Eskom was also discounted in the regulatory decision. So they basically looked at it as other income, and they reduced the return that was given to Eskom. So it is a concern to us whether NERSA would continue to treat the further government support that will be provided to Eskom in the same way, and we are having a conversation with the policy department whether there are legal instruments that would enable a more speedy resolution of this issue, because we don't think that the court process is really enabling in terms of ensuring that we can get a quick decision. So the court process could take a number of years. But secondly, if you look at historic decisions that the court has made, they've referred these matters back to NERSA to consider, because they don't deem themselves to be a competent body to make regulatory decisions. And hence I was saying that we are talking to the Department of Energy around ensuring that the NERSA amendment bill is finalized, to ensure that there can be a tribunal where NERSA decisions can be taken for appeal. At the moment, there is no appeal body. The only recourse that Eskom would have, or NERSA would have, would be a court process. Okay, I'll leave also the last question to my minister.
Thank you, DDG. But I will ask, because we still have 30 minutes, honorable members, and I want us to use it, one, as question to the minister, and follow up to a particular question. Or perhaps if you have a question that is not properly captured, you've got that opportunity. It's only 1 minute per member. I'll try to be very strict because there are outstanding questions that she has referred to the minister with what you'll be adding. Therefore, that 15 minutes of him responding, we must allocate to him. Therefore, I'll start with Chabalala, as normally I go down.
Thanks, Chairperson. You're so generous. I thought you wouldn't give us a chance. Minister, we did welcome the paper. What we're saying is that it's long awaited, for at least we can see progress. I asked the question, I think Ms. Makola didn't answer it, about the driving forces. How did we come to this document? Is it bureaucrats? Is it external partners that really came up with this brilliant white paper? For us to just understand the bureaucracy, or rather the good minds that came up with this paper. The corruption remains an issue, and it's mentioned. Page, what is this page? Thanks, Chairperson, 29. This recovery proceeds. You know, we've been rehearsing this thing of state of capture and so forth and so on. But the underlying fact is that the issue of the vetting remains a primary issue. So declarations of interest, security clearances, how are we going to ensure this is done from the onset, including the board members that must be vetters, must have security clearance, so that we don't even go with these 3 phases. We end up with the same bureaucrats, the same people in the supply chain, procurement process, people who are intelligent enough to overcloud and cloud the processes. So I'm really concerned about it. It's been coming in scope. How are we dealing with it? Chair, let me leave it there. Thank you.
Honorable Mkonazi.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks again for the second round. I just want to make a follow-up on the issue raised by myself and Honorable Piri on the issue of consultation. Just to be detailed, I think Honorable Piri tried to cover it in the very detailed issue, to say what is it that will do to inform the person down there, the consumer or the customer, to say on the process, and what will be the benefits of us as government and also the consumer, because we must bear in mind that we are doing this based on the mandate of the state-owned companies by the government. Secondly, Chair, I'm really want this to be answered by the minister. I am now choosing you. Sorry about that. On your presentation, slide 17, on the 6 major benefits, the second benefit and the last benefit drives economic growth in the country. If I can be taken to the how part of it, and to promote innovation and entrepreneurship, can I be taken through the how part of it? That would be my take, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mkonazi. Honorable Gumede.
Chair, perhaps it will be, I think, very much fair that in the presence of the minister, we say that we have been satisfied with the presentation and as well as the articulation of your answers. I think on my side, I think all other members are happy, but the chair will still cover that. But my question is just, it's in fact, it's a follow-up. It appears that when you were answering my question on corruption, you have, in fact, what's the term? You have made corruption secondary, right? But what, in fact, my trust was more on some elements that may still be within the system, that we may be sailing along with them into the new era. The fear of unknown, that they may as well corrupt the system, right? So that was that perhaps it was going to make sense if we look into that. If there are none, anyway, we'll be happy. But if there are people that you may sort of be suspecting, what's a strategy? You know, I've heard one of the municipality that they've identified all those officials that were involved in a kind of corruption, and they've given them leave. Said, no, go on leave because we are now going for local government election. We may begin to tamper with the processes. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's where my trust was, that what are we going to do with those people? The other one that I've asked, it's in fact was mainly on communication. What is our communication strategy in terms of communicating all this? As members of the committee, some of us were still confused with all what is taking place. Worse, with the communities outside. Some of them don't even understand what exactly do we mean by load shedding. Now it's getting much more difficult now when we talk about unbundling. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, Jay. But anyway, I'm covered.
Thank you, His Excellent Prince Buthelezi.
You said, I don't have a follow-up. Thank you so much. Very progressive.
Yeah, that's progressive. Honorable Labiri.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, since this term of the 6th, do you think that the situation of Eskom is in this situation? Do you think that if you work together with the Minister of Energy, the situation was not in this situation? Do you think that is it the good thing that work together, take the decision together instead of the call and all the problem of Eskom?
Thank you, Honorable Lamini. Honorable Kachalia.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the replies on procurement and welcome the accession to the release of the shareholder compact. That's very welcome. And I note the measures that have been put forward to address debt service, which are strongly aligned to operational improvement. But there was no reference to my question on HR and the one-size-fits-all approach, in that my question is, does Eskom have a differential incentive program by business unit, because I think this is important for performance. And secondly, in terms of labor, you state that there's no large job losses envisaged, and at the same time say that you will have to deal with with the rising manpower costs. And there appears to be a contradiction here, and perhaps you'll address this. And I take it the Minister will address the other issue that I raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Kachalia. Honorable Mare, my homeboy.
No, I'm not going to ask further questions. Just want to know if the Minister is surviving all this SOECs.
What? What's that question?
Come again?
What's that question?
I just want to know if the Minister is surviving all these problems with the SOCs.
He's Mr. Fix-It.
Okay, Honorable Piri.
Thanks, Chair. As your Minister, as the DDG has already given you my last question, and Honorable Mkwanazi has emphasized it is of interest to me and ordinary South Africans. But let me not repeat it and go to, there are 5 key challenges that are who have been presented that are happening in Eskom. And it's one of those are in terms of governance and management that is failing. As much as the other colleague has raised it, and lack of accountability. Further, as you have identified those, and as a shareholder, how are you going to make it a point that you do away with the failure of accountability? What are your processes in place versus even in the department itself? You still have acting DDG, acting DG. And we welcome also the appointment of the new CEO of Eskom. But still, while we are busy planning and preparing, and you have acting people who are on top there, then tomorrow you're going to have new, because we can't dictate to you to say there must be those or whoever, but there are possibilities that you can employ a new person who must start to get to the run, who must understand all these processes. But then my plea to you is that can't you speed up this process, because they are the ones who are overseeing all this process, and let's get everybody on board when we start to say we are dealing with this paper. That is I need to understand, are you getting it really, that having actings is something else? And also to concur with Honorable Kacha, the shareholders compact, how far? Because we have been told that it went to the cabinet. How far with it? If not, then what are the stumbling blocks? Because some of us, we believe we might not have the proper answers or proper understanding. We believe it will also try to assist other state entities, even though it might not be Eskom, but all those state entities has got the same. It will give us a better resolution on other issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Piri. Thank you, Honorable members. You are very disciplined. Welcome, Minister, officially. I think I didn't properly welcome you. And we also appreciate that you stick to your plans in relation to the appointment of the CEO. We were worried that you might not make that commitment of 3 months that we were given. We really appreciate that. But also, DDG, Honorable Kalchalia, that question he was asking about the shareholder government representative, I think he was asking whether they are interacting. What form of interaction are they based there in an entity, so that they can be engaged on daily basis? I don't know whether I captured. If I didn't capture you well, can you rephrase your government directive kind of question?
Chair, it was simply a comment and a question, perhaps, in relation to the nature of the involvement and engagement of the shareholders' representatives in Eskom, the particular entity, and how they interact that in a manner that builds trust, rather than creating a climate of sort of retribution and fear amongst people. Because I think companies thrive on trust, and that needs to be built. That was the point I was making.
You captured it now? Yes, okay. We start with the Minister or with you? No. Okay. Thanks, Minister.
No, Good afternoon, and thank you for your patience. I unfortunately couldn't leave Cabinet earlier, so couldn't be here. But let me thank my colleague for very ably presenting the paper, quite evidently. And thanks for the questions. How does the paper get drafted? Well, it went through about 30 drafts, and no, there weren't really too many experts involved. It took a lot of hard work, but it also involved contributions from the Treasury, contributions from the Minister of Energy, contributions from the Minister of Environment, contributions from the Minister of DTI and C, as it is called now, so that we get different dimensions of the paper together, and you'll see that they are discrete elements that each of them contribute. And they are perhaps a follow-up paper that might be something that we're looking at, which is what are the technological changes that are happening in the energy terrain. There are smart grids, there's different forms of generation, there's clean climate or clean coal or technology that's available. There's the application of artificial intelligence to detect problems on the generation side or transmission side. So as we did this paper, we ran into all of those developments that are occurring around the world, and that refers to the point around innovation as well. So we'll see if we get the space by early next year, we'll have some kind of framework or paper which tells us what are all these technology changes, including different types of generation that seem to be occurring. And the one that will be relevant in our case is how solar panels on rooftops of all our communities can actually revolutionize supply of energy on the one hand, but also people could earn income once our grid is ready to receive excess energy. So the Prince could generate let's say 200 kilowatts of energy, but he only uses 100. The other 100 can be sold, and you can get an income from that. That's into the future, but it's something that actually can change the character in our communities quite seriously. There were a couple of questions on corruption. Our observations 18 months down the line, but as I think Honorable Tlavini was pointing out, a couple of months into the sixth administration, is that state capture and corruption still has its tentacles in all of these entities. Because you change a board or you change a management team doesn't mean that you've eliminated corruption. Secondly, when corruption is allowed at the top, it becomes systemic at some level. So it becomes okay and acceptable to engage in certain types of behavior. The third is that corruption could also take the form of disruption. In other words, you could have, as you can see, leakages of confidential board documents. Right? So somebody in an office around the board and the papers that the board deals with then decides, I'm going to leak it to whatever entity it needs to be leaked to. And in that way, we create a lot of confusion in the marketplace. So you would have seen a lot of confusion about the new CEO and names being banted around, all of which were wrong. But anxiety on the part of people who need to know then creates difficulties. Vetting, I think it happens at the senior management level, but I think there's a backlog in the system as well. We encounter that in departments also. What we need an update, which I don't have, unless my colleague has it, is what happened to the lifestyle audits. I think many of those, about 1,200 people were found to be in Eskom certainly doing business with Eskom through proxies in one form or another. In other words, I'm an Eskom employee, I create a company in my wife's name or cousin's name, and then I make sure that they get the contracts or tenders that are actually involved. And some of those have been acted upon. I think you need another round of action, but the key deterrent is going to be when the first of these sorts of people who've already stolen $1 billion or more rands from Eskom in one form or another are actually in court and actually in orange uniforms. So the sooner prosecutions occur, that's the greatest deterrence. And a lot of this fight back narratives that we see around us is about protecting either access to tenders on the one hand, or the fear that people are going to actually end up in jail. And so, disrupt the process as much as possible, and hopefully it actually helps. So the fight against corruption is going to be a long-standing one, and it's important that even from a parliamentary point of view, we take a strong stand in this particular regard. Yesterday I met the union and I said to them, one of the things that unions need to come to on board with is when there's a member of the union who's been distinctly guilty of corruption, don't come to their defense. In fact, join us in making sure that we eradicate corruption or disruption in any form. So I think all of us as a society, if we don't want corruption to become, and this is not about any particular political party, by the way. It's across party lines, it's across all sorts of institutional lines as well. So if we want a better society to be left to future generations, then we must start doing the right thing now, in a sense. The benefits to the citizen, Honorable Mkunazi asks, and I want to relate this to the cost structure of Eskom and the issue of tariffs. So we hear this language which says we want cost-reflective tariffs. But the question we don't ask is what cost? So you can have costs of R1 billion and then say my tariff must actually pay for that cost. But inside that cost is wastage, is inefficiency, is procurement deficiencies, and you're asking citizens and businesses that you want to be world-class and competitive to actually pay for that. So we've now begun a second round of work. The first round, the management and board did extremely well, but there's a second round that will start hopefully soon. Some intensive analysis has been taking place of new opportunities to actually cut costs in Eskom, which could mean that you can stabilize the rate at which tariffs are increasing. Because it's fine to say you want tariffs to be increased in order to pay Eskom so that it can have the right kind of financial picture. But at the same time, I think we owe it to our economy that we lower the cost of doing business. Right? And what's increasingly coming up in this kind of economic climate is where electricity tariffs, freight tariffs, port tariffs, water tariffs are all being raised in different forms by different types of businesses as cost-raising factors, right, which then makes companies uncompetitive, both in the domestic market but particularly in the export market as well. So you can see the relationship. If you have efficient institutions giving us cost-effective tariffs, then it has a positive impact on the economy as a whole, and that's going to be an important contributor to the kind of growth path that government has formulated, both in terms of, for example, releasing spectrum, the e-visas, the certainty we now have on the energy front in terms of the integrated resource plan, and so on and so on. So there's a whole menu of things that we're doing right. This will be another supportive measure as far as the economy is concerned. And as you know, energy costs play a crucial role in different types of sectors of the economy, particularly manufacturing and mining get impacted by that. So that's a benefit, I think, ultimately that citizens will have. So I think the obligation government has is to have utilities that are structured in a way in which they are in line with the changes that are happening in the world, the changes that are happening in that particular sector, So if you take our ports in South Africa, there's 7, let's call them commercial ports. There was one stage at which our hometown Durban was the leading port on the African continent. Its ranking currently is number 3. Right? Port Said in Egypt and Tangiers, I think that's in Morocco, are now number 1 and 2. So, and I was at our port on Monday to look at what's going on there. So this refers to Mr. Marais' question as he walks in again. How do you manage all these entities, and somehow you've got to manage them. But it's a lesson for us that we don't live in a world where everything stands still and waits for South Africa to catch up. We're living in a competitive, fast-moving world. And if we fall asleep somewhere along the line, the world is not going to wait for us, and the rest of Africa is not going to wait for us either. So either we clean up our acts quickly, get efficiencies into our system, make quick decisions about what needs to be done, and have the kind of competency that we require to implement our decisions, or we'll begin to fall in the global rankings and competitiveness rankings as well. And what we've learned in the last couple of weeks about, say, our ports, for example, is that we have huge opportunities if those ports run efficiently. And that's why all the stakeholders need to come to the party, whether you are labor or freight forwarders or whatever. So in the latter part of the day on Monday, I met about 30 or 40 of the freight forwarding and shipping fraternity in Durban and many others as well, so that we can get their buy-in, and they came in a very positive spirit as well. So the benefit, not to the citizen only, but to the economy more generally, which means citizens ultimately, I think is very self-evident if we move in line with the IRP, if we restructure Eskom in the way we are proposing, if we get efficiencies on the generation side, both through competition and better operational management, if we are able to remove unnecessary and burdensome costs, and coal is certainly one of them. So there's a menu of things that we need to do, some of which has already been done, more of which actually needs to be done as we go forward. On the entrepreneurship front, I think we have many younger engineers and so on who either want to come and work at Eskom or are working at Eskom, but also many outside who have ideas. And the new front that's opening up that honorable members might need to become aware of is the whole terrain of battery storage or storage of energy. Right? So battery storage is one form, but I've met young black engineers who have formed a company and they have another form of it as well. So it's giving rise to innovative ideas. They're coupling themselves with foreign companies. Some are just generating ideas themselves, and you'll begin to see some of that appearing soon on the stage as we go forward as well. Communication around unbundling, it will take place over time. So as these changes happen, we'll have to start working particularly with local communities where power stations are. And in the paper, you'll see that in the section on just transition, we talk about a pilot project. So you can talk about just transition as an idea, but there's a power station that might close in 2 or 3 years' time. What happens to workers in the community there? So we want to work with Eskom and other government departments and stakeholders and create a pilot project from which in the next year we can learn. What does it mean to retrain workers? What does it mean to get a different kind of entrepreneurial activity in communities around there? What does it mean to install a wind farm or a solar panel installation? How do you use what appear to be disused facilities? So there are many ideas around the world that when a power station is closed down, there's alternate uses that you can put it to. So the pilots are one way of experimenting and learning, and it's only by doing it that we're going to learn what the just transition means in the context of the kind of changes we need to make in our situation. In Cabinet, we work as a team, Honorable Dlamini. So the Minister of Energy's task, on the one hand, is to give us the IRP, so that we have that as a plan. They also approve all sorts of initiatives. So, for example, the next round of renewable IPPs depends on when the Department of Energy initiates that. And they also manage some of the NERSA issues that my colleague referred to earlier on. As far as Honorable Kacharia is concerned, I'm not familiar with the incentive programs that we have at Eskom, so we'll have to get the information for you. And then on the labor issue, I think that the approach we're taking is one which says, Chair, that as much as possible, we don't want people out in the streets. So we need to start, and you've heard us say this publicly, and the President has said it as well, we want labor, business, government, and the communities to work together to find different ways of deploying people. So currently, for example, as a particular unit at a power station gets shut down, like I think in Komati, some of the workers are being transferred to Kusile as the Kusile units begin to develop. So there's internal transfers that are taking place. We also have vacancies on the generation side in power stations themselves that need to be filled with particular types of operational engineers, some of whom disappeared and the vacancies weren't filled. So a while ago the board gave consent for 200 positions to be created, some of whom could come from these older power stations. We also need to look at municipalities. More than half of our municipalities, although they have the constitutional mandate to reticulate, as the Constitution says, electricity, don't have the technical capability to do so. So as we get more work done on the distribution side, you could take some of the expertise that you have in Eskom and utilize it in municipalities or such structures as might appear on the stage as we go forward. And then if our economy grows, there are all sorts of new possibilities that we will look at as well. So this isn't the kind of market narrative which says, and this is related to the point around interference that you've heard in the public discourse. So if you say don't fire 16,000 people, and if you consider that to be interference, well, I'm sorry, we are going to interfere, because it matters whether you put 16,000 families into the street as far as the ANC is concerned. And but in this case, there hasn't been interference in that sense. I don't go and tell an engineer which spanner to use. And I don't go to a plant and say, don't buy this coal, buy that coal. What we do is when there are crises, as there have been over the last year around limitations on the generation side, is have urgent meetings with management and board to A, ask what's going on, B, what solutions are you working on, C, what assurances can you give the country that there will be no load shedding if that's possible, and if there is, give adequate notice of what the load shedding is, and E, if there is load shedding, keep it as short as possible, because it's a very disruptive event that actually takes place. But more importantly, what's our plan to get out of this situation? And clearly, we've said this to you before, we still need a safety buffer of 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts, which then allows Eskom to take a whole plant out for 3 or 4 months and do the long-term maintenance that needs to be done. Because that is what was not done in the last, 6, 7, 8 years. And part of that process of cost saving as well that we want to start looking at is those who provide maintenance services or repair services when there's tube leaks and so on. Are they doing the quality of work that's required and at a cost that is required? I think I might have given you this number before, but the board informed me of a claim in relation to, I think, the 2 new plants lodged by a particular company, which says, pay me 27 billion rands. And when that claim was interrogated by a set of financial experts that they had hired, eventually that 27 billion rands became 2.7 billion rands. Right? So that's the private sector we're talking about. And I think my colleague was trying to explain the role. This word privatization is a very misleading one. When you build Kusile or Medupi, you think it's Eskom workers that are building it. It's construction firms that do the civil work. It's engineering firms that put up the boiler. It's other types of engineers that put in the conveyor belt. It's other contractors that dig up the coal mine to make coal available. That's all the private sector that is actually involved. And the private sector is the biggest beneficiary of the billions of rands that we spend and overspend in all of these projects at the end of the day. So I think we must get our conception right, not worry too much about ideology, but look at the facts. And the facts are that most of this kind of activity is actually undertaken by the private sector. That's why you have these tender processes, right? Because you're asking the private sector to bid competitively for a particular project to actually be undertaken. So there's no interference as far as I'm concerned. And ultimately, nobody's going to ask who's board member number 8 on the Eskom board when something happens. They're going to ask who's the minister. Am I right? Because as far as the public is concerned, we are accountable. But at the same time, we know that corporate governance rules must be abided by. We're very aware of it. And I think the question of accountability was raised earlier on as well by Honorable Fidi. And on the one hand, we need to hold these entities and their boards and management to account. And on the other hand, once they've stabilized the situation, they must run the show. Then, Mr. Murray, I can get a lot more rest than I'm getting at the moment. So then, as far as the other issues that Honorable Piri raised, Chair, governance and management, we're slowly beginning to get that right. But whether it's in the department or whether it's in relation to these entities, we must see that we are in a transition mode. We're moving away from this past that was quite destructive to a point where we want to stabilize both the department and these entities. And so, for example, in Transnet, the processes of cleaning up started a little bit later. And you're going to find lots of acting names there, but the board is in the process of filling in many of those vacancies. But they have to go through their own processes. It's not for me to interfere with them, but I can actually phone the chair of the board from time to time and say, can we speed this thing up so that we have the kind of certainty that we actually require. So we're well on our way. Hopefully, a lot of that will be done by the end of the year, and some of it will be done early in the new year. But we agree with you that we're not Hollywood or Bollywood or Nollywood, so we don't need too many acting positions, and we certainly share your concern in that regard. The shareholder management bill is what I think you were referring to. Hasn't actually been to cabinet, but we've got to rethink all of that, because that's a legacy out of the Piecha Commission that was in 2013 or something like that. If you remember, there was a review, and you might want to, as honorable members, look at that report. It's huge, but you can still look at it, on SOEs. And what are some of the measures that government needs to take into account that they had actually recommended. The President is in the process of establishing a presidential SOE council, and I think we might actually emerge with a different model arising out of that conversation. So we might not rush into formulating a bill when there's other changes that we might actually want to undertake. And we're learning a lot of lessons, honorable members, in the last year and a half about what works and what doesn't work. Every day is a new revelation. And every day we learn about different sectors of the economy and how we could possibly manage them as well. I think the NERSA issue was dealt with earlier on. The one thing that I wanted to add on the clean energy side, Chair, is we will sign off soon on an important project that Eskom will get involved in, which uses in large part a loan made by the World Bank to the construction of the Medupi power station, and that is the battery storage project. And it could become quite an important world-class project when it begins to get off the ground in the next year or so. But we'll give you more information once we actually have that. But I think for the rest, we've addressed many of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable members, I can feel some, maybe they have slept while we were speaking. But let me take this opportunity to thank you for your coming to the Portfolio Committee. By the way, we were informed about the delay that you are still addressing the cabinet, but we appreciate that you came there and attended to this task. But also, we would like to appreciate the presentation that was made by Ms. Mokololo, the DDG. Makololo. Okay, she was very good. She presented it quite good. Therefore, she was equal to the task.
Be careful, you're not arguing for the promise.
No, I think if the intention of bonus is to reward good work, then let it be. But thank you very much. I think, honourable members, we reached the end of our session. Thank you, everybody, for the attendance.
Thank you. Then we can have the SAA.
Oh. Yeah.
No.
Let me just brief you on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, please.
Thanks. Honourable members, can we get a quick briefing? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.